Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our session today. Glad to be back with all of you. And today we will be discussing two very important chapters of English grammar. The first chapter that we'll be discussing is modal verbs. And the second chapter we'll be discussing, the first chapter we will be discussing is the active passive voice. And the second chapter today that we'll be discussing is modal verbs. So let's get started. Okay. All right. Sultan Al-Arafat is here saying Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. Sultan, how are you? Tasniya Arabi says Assalamu alaikum. Sir, how are you? I'm fine. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for asking. How are you, Tasniya? Salahuddin Rana says Assalamu alaikum, sir. Wa alaikum salam to you. Ninzamuni says Assalamu alaikum, sir. How are you, sir? Well, I'm fine. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for asking. And I'm sure you're fine as well. Okay. So active versus passive voice. Dustin Bushra is also here, saying Assalamu alaikum, sir. Wa alaikum salam to you too. Dustin, how are you? Let me know how you are. I'm sure all of you are doing great. Okay. So what is the active voice? The sentence. Let me enlarge the screen for all of you so you can see it better. What is the active voice? When the subject of a sentence performs the verb's action, we say that the sentence is in the active voice. Sentences in the active voice have a strong, direct, and clear tone. Here are some short and straightforward examples of active voice. Monkeys adore bananas. The cashier counted the money. The dog chased the squirrel. All three sentences have a basic active voice construction: subject, verb, and object. The subject monkey performs the action described by adore. The subject, the cashier, performs the action described by counted. The subject, the dog, performs the action described by chased. The subjects are doing, doing, and doing. They take action in their sentences, right? So as you can see, we already know that in each subject, or in every in every sentence, we have a subject followed by a verb, or followed by the verb that basically tells you what the subject is doing. So whenever we have a situation, or whenever we have a sentence constructed in this way, where you have the subject first, followed by the verb, and then you have the object, then you can possibly say that that sentence is in the active voice, okay? Such as, for example, take a look at the first example here. Monkeys adore bananas. Monkeys adore bananas, right? So which is the subject here? The subject is monkeys. What do they do? Adore. And what's the object? What do they adore? Bananas. So monkeys adore bananas. Here, this sentence is in the active voice because here the subject is actively doing something, right? Although yes, adoring bananas may not be a it can be an action in a form where you can see it, but we all know that monkeys love bananas because we can see them eating bananas all the time, or whenever we offer them bananas, they eat, they accept it, and they eat bananas with a lot of enthusiasm, right? So that basically shows that they love or adore bananas. So that particular action of their eating bananas expresses the adoration that they have for bananas. So here, when you say that monkeys adore bananas, or such as the cashier counted the money, in these sentences you can see that the subjects have taken some action, have gone for some action, right? So whenever we have a sentence constructed as such, where you have the subject clearly visible, clearly understood, followed by the verb telling you what the subject has done, and then you have the object, you know that sentence is in the active voice. And most sentences in English language Most sentences in the English language are in the active voice. So all these three sentences over here have a basic active voice construction. First, you have the subject, and then you have the verb and the object. Now, the subject monkey performs the action described by the verb adore. The subject, the cashier, performs the action described by counted. So what did the cashier do? The cashier counted the money. The subject, the dog, performs the action described by chased. So what happened here? The dog chased the squirrel. So the dog undertook an action. What action did he undertake? He chased a squirrel, or for this case, a particular squirrel. So we say the squirrel. So the dog chased the squirrel. Okay? All right. So now we know this is exactly what the active voice is and how sentences are constructed using the active voice or in the active voice. Now, moving forward to the next slide, here we come to know what the passive voice is. A sentence is in the passive voice, or on the other hand, when the subject is a sentence is in the passive voice, on the other hand, when the subject is acted on by the verb. I'll repeat this again for you. A sentence is in the passive voice, on the other hand, when the subject of the sentence is acted on by the verb. The passive voice is always constructed with a conjugated form of to be plus the verb's past participle. Doing this usually generates a preposition as well. That sounds much more complicated than it is. Passive voice is actually quite easy to detect. For these examples of passive voice, we will transform the three active sentences discussed already to illustrate the difference. Okay, we have a query here from Dustin Bushra asking if adore is an adverb. Now, adore is not an adverb. Adore is actually a verb. That's because it's a verb like love, such as, for example, if you say someone loves someone else, then you would be describing the action performed by your subject. So just like that, adore is a verb where you adore someone. Okay, adore is actually a synonym of love, or synonym of love is a more appropriate meaning of the word adore. So adore is actually a verb, not an adverb. Okay. Now let's take a look at these examples here. On the last slide, we saw the sentences in the active voice where we said we read monkeys adore bananas. Now, if you flip it, or if you actually change the voice of this sentence to the passive voice, then it becomes bananas are adored by monkeys. Bananas are adored by monkeys. The money was counted by the cashier. The money was counted by the cashier. Now, this is the passive construction, or the passive voice. This sentence is now is in the passive voice, whereas it was in the active voice, saying the cashier counted the money. The squirrel was chased by the dog. Again, this sentence is now in the passive voice. In the active voice, it was the dog chased the squirrel. And note the differences, note the differences here between the two sentences. Note the difference between sentence number 1 and sentence number 1a. Take a look at the active voice first. Monkeys adore bananas, right? Here the focus is on the subject, which is the subject here, monkeys, right? Now what are they doing, or what do? They adore. So monkeys adore bananas. But in the passive construction, the focus is shifted. Now, the subject has also changed. The subject is no more monkeys. The subject is now bananas. Bananas are adored by monkeys. Now, follow this. The subject changes in the passive construction, and the object, or the word that was the object in the active construction, is now the subject in the passive construction. Do you follow? Such as the word bananas was the object when it was in the active construction, or when the sentence was in the active voice, the word bananas was the object of that sentence. But when you actually shifted or flipped or somehow changed the construction or the voice of the sentence from active to passive, you can see that the object has now actually become the subject. Bananas was the object, but now it has become the subject. So you say, bananas are adored by monkeys. So in the passive voice, whenever you construct or change a sentence into the passive voice, the verb form changes as well, right? Such as in the active voice, the verb adore remained adore, but in the passive voice, it changed to are adored. So how are verbs constructed or formed or written in the passive voice? We have this helping verb. We have this helping verb immediately followed by the past participle of the main verb. So here, since the sentence is in the simple present tense, so we had monkeys adore bananas. So this sentence was in the simple present tense, but now you have to maintain the tense of the sentence and at the same time change it to the passive voice. So it becomes bananas are adored by monkeys. If you said, or if you had to say that monkeys adored bananas instead of monkeys adore bananas, then your sentence would be in the simple past tense, right? So maintaining the tense of the sentence, you have to shift it or change it to the passive voice. And in that case, you would say, bananas were adored by monkeys. Now, let's go to the second example here. The money was counted by the cashier. The money was counted by the cashier. This sentence is in the passive construction or is in the passive voice. In the active voice, the sentence was, the cashier counted the money. The cashier counted the money. So you can see here the focus in the active, excuse me, in the active voice, the focus was on the subject, the cashier. And which was the object in the active voice? The money, right? So the cashier counted the money. But now, when you change this sentence into the passive voice from the active voice, then the object of the sentence changes, or the object of the sentence becomes the subject now. So the money, which was the object in the active voice, now has become the subject in the passive voice, such as the money was counted by the cashier. Now follow, when you said the cashier counted the money, the tense, what was the tense of this sentence? The tense was the simple past tense. So even in the passive construction, or even in the passive voice, when you have changed it to the passive voice, you must make sure that your sentence, the tense of the sentence remains the same. So you have to keep it in the simple past tense, but only this time the verb form or the way you the way you write your verb is changed. How? In the active voice it was just counted, but in the passive voice it becomes was counted. Now we are having to bring was here because the sentence is now in the passive construction, and the subject of the verb counted is following is an uncountable noun. So this uncountable noun must be followed by a singular verb. So the main verb counted cannot stand on its own. So it needs help from a helping verb. So you have the money was counted by the cashier. The money was counted by the cashier. Okay. All right. We have a question, another query from Dustin asking: is it possible to categorize the word adore as an intransitive or a transitive verb? I think adore is a transitive, an intransitive verb. A transitive verb. It's because right after adore, you have to follow it with a noun or a pronoun. We don't naturally, or we don't normally put a preposition after adore. We don't say, I adore to do this. Follow this. We don't say, or we cannot say, I adore to do this. That's not possible. That's not just done. It's because that would be grammatically incorrect if we said so. So we rather have to say, I adore him, I adore her, I adore books. So you see him, her, books, these are all nouns and pronouns. Nouns are pronouns. So adore in that case is definitely a transitive verb that must immediately be followed by a noun or a pronoun. Okay? All right. Okay, I'm going to take another query here from Ninzamoni asking, I was reading Shakespeare, blank, I heard a noise, while and when. Why one is wrong here? Of course, while would be wrong here. Why? Because we put while when we want to talk about an action that was ongoing. Okay, so I was reading Shakespeare when I heard a noise. So the hearing of that noise is a one-time event, or is a one-time action, or is a very quick incident. It's a very quick incident. It doesn't stay, or such a noise as is described didn't take place for a long time. It just happened, right? You just heard a noise. So you have to go with when in this case, not while. Whereas on the other hand, you could say, while I was reading Shakespeare, I heard a noise. That could be it, because while you were doing something. Now, reading takes a longer time, of course, right? You cannot just reading is not a thing of a minute or two, or it's not a very quick incident. So you could say that while I was talking, or while I was in a meeting, or I was presenting, something else occurred. But when you say I was reading Shakespeare when I heard a noise, okay, then you go with when, because here you're talking about hearing a noise, and this noise actually didn't go or it didn't take place for a long time. You see, therefore you say I was reading Shakespeare when I heard a noise. But if you want to talk about a longer action, or if you were talking about a longer action, then probably you could go with the word while and not when. So you could say while I was reading Shakespeare, comma, I heard a noise. But I was reading Shakespeare when I heard a noise. Follow? Okay. I hope you're clear. All right. Taking a look at the third category of, or the third distinction here. The squirrel was chased by the dog. This sentence is in the passive construction. And in the active construction, or in the active voice, it was the dog chased the squirrel. The dog chased the squirrel. So when you say the dog chased the squirrel, the focus is on the subject, which is the dog. So you want to focus more on the dog here, not what he chased, not what it chased, right? Rather that it chased, and what chased, the dog chased the squirrel. But you want to focus on the squirrel now and not the dog. So you flip the sentence, or you change the voice of the sentence from active to passive, and becomes the squirrel was chased by the dog. Now note, chased is when you just write chased, this verb is in the active voice. But when you switch it to the passive voice, it becomes was chased. So the dog chased the dog chased the squirrel was chased by the dog. Here, in the active voice, the subject takes an action. The subject is followed by its verb. The subject is immediately followed by the verb, or the word that tells what the subject has done, or is doing, or did. But in the passive voice, the subject is acted upon by the verb. The subject is acted upon by the verb. You see, the verb is the main focus here, and also it increases the focus on the object of the sentence. Which object? The word that was the object in the active form, in the active voice. So the dog chased the squirrel, active voice, but in the passive construction, or in the passive voice, it becomes the squirrel was chased by the dog. Okay? All right. We have a query here from Salahuddin Rana asking, so actually something is done to the person, thing denoted by the subject is passive voice. So I'll read this again. So actually something is done to the person, or thing denoted by the subject. I'm really sorry, but I haven't understood your query here. Could you please kindly post it again and write it in clearer words? Thank you in advance. Okay. So let me read this slide once again for you. A sentence is in the passive voice when the subject is acted on by the verb. The passive voice is always constructed with a conjugated form of to be plus the verb's past participle, such as to be verb would be was, is, were, are, right? Or have, has, followed by the past participle of the main verb. Okay. Doing this usually generates a preposition as well. Yes, of course, it's because in the active voice, we keep the subject at the forefront, or we keep the subject at the very beginning of the sentence, right? Such as, I teach English. Follow this. When I say I teach English, so here, the focus is on the word or on the subject or on the pronoun I. So when I tell you I teach English, right? But now, if I change this sentence to the passive voice, or if I shift the voice of the sentence to active from passive, to passive from active, so it becomes English is taught by me. English is taught by me. Here, I do want to mention that it is me who teaches English. So what do? I have to mention it that it is me who teaches English. So I keep that essence, and I do mention myself, but I change it, and the subject now becomes the object of the sentence only with the help of the preposition by. So I teach English, English is taught by me. In the passive construction, the focus is now on what I teach, which is English. But in the first sentence, or in the active form, or in the active voice, the focus was on the pronoun I, or the subject that I teach English. In the passive form, it becomes English is taught by me. But then again, I do have to mention that it is me who teaches English. So how do I keep it? I keep it in the sentence at the last with the help of the preposition by. Now, like I said, in the passive construction, the subject is acted upon by the verb. The verb takes precedence over the subject in the passive construction. Okay, the verb is actually more valued than the verb is actually focused more than the subject. So English is taught by me, or I teach English in active. English is taught by me in the passive. Okay. And Zamuni says, active voice and passive voice, will be same tense always. If you mean to ask if they will always be in the same tense, yes. Yes, definitely. So if you say that I talked to him, when you say I talked to him, right, you mean that you spoke to him, or that you've talked with him, or you've talked to him, right? So this sentence is in the simple past tense when you say I talked to him. Now this sentence is in the active voice. If you shift it, or if you change the voice of the sentence to the passive voice, it becomes he was talked to by me. He was talked to by me. So even in this passive construction, the tense remains the same. The tense is the simple past tense. Okay, the tense doesn't change, but yes, the verb form may change. The verb talked is changed to was talked, because who was talked to? It was him who was talked to. Who talked to him? Me. I talked to him, right? I talked to him in the active voice. He was talked to by me in the passive voice. Okay? All right. Now, let's read this out here. When to use active and passive voice. Using the active voice conveys a strong, clear tone, and the passive voice is subtler and weaker. Here's some good advice. Don't use the passive voice just because you think it sounds a bit fancier than the active voice. That said, there are times the passive voice is useful and called for. Take the squirrel was chased by the dog, for example. The sentence construction would be helpful if the squirrel were the focus of your writing and not the dog. A good rule of thumb is to try to put the majority of your sentences in the active voice unless you truly can't write your sentence in any other way. So what do we learn from this slide? We're actually being asked that it's always better to write our sentences in the active voice or using the active voice. We will only write sentences in the passive voice when we have to, when we must. Okay? Such as, for example, when we record or when we write meeting minutes. You know what meeting minutes are? Meeting minutes are basically, minuting a meeting or taking notes or actually recording the discussion done in a meeting. So when you do it on a formal, when you do it formally, you have to write all the details of the meeting in the passive voice. So there are times when you have to write certain things in the passive voice, such as when we scribe or medical scribing. Most of medical scribing is actually done in the passive voice. Most of medical scribing is done in the passive voice. So you write things in the passive voice, or you write in the passive voice when you have to. But generally, most of the time, it's better if you go for the active voice, because then your writing remains clear and clearer and simpler. Okay? All right. All right, Salahuddin Rana has written, a verb when its form shows that something is done to the person or thing denoted by the subject is passive voice. A verb when its form shows that something is done to the person. Yes, of course, right. So we use the passive voice, or when we change the voice of the verb to the passive to show that something was done to the subject now. Such as the squirrel was chased by the dog, right? Yes, of course. Now, yes, it does make sense now. So when I say that the squirrel was chased, I'm talking about what happened to the squirrel, not what the squirrel did. But who did this to the squirrel? The dog. So I can say the squirrel was chased by the dog. But in the active form, I'm not going to focus on the fact that something was done to the squirrel, but rather say who did what. So the dog did something. The focus is now on the subject, the dog. So I say the dog chased. Chased who? Chased whom? The dog chased the squirrel. But in the passive form, the focus is on the squirrel, letting us know that something happened to the subject here. So the squirrel was chased. The squirrel was chased by the dog. Passive form or passive voice. In the active voice, the dog chased the squirrel. All right, thank you for clearing this out, Salahuddin. All right, so yes, this is pretty much it from active and passive voice. Let me know if you have any other confusion. If not, we will be moving up. We will be moving forward to modal verbs. So, what are modal verbs? Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs, also called helping verbs. We discussed helping verbs the day we were studying verbs or verb tenses. No, not verb tenses, sorry, just verbs. Today we actually discussed verbs. Akaninza Moni has this question asking if we can use the passive voice in official documents. Yes, we do when we have to. It's not a mandatory thing to do that you must write all official documents or formal writing that you write all formal that you actually do all formal writing in the passive voice. No, it is not compulsory unless, of course, it is. Okay. Mostly we stick to the active voice, but we change or we write in the passive voice when we have to. We will not unless we have to. Okay? All right. So what are modal verbs? Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs, also called helping verbs, like can, will, could, shall, must, would, might, and should. After a modal verb, the root form of a verb is generally used. The word to should not appear after a modal verb. An exception is the phrase ought to, which is considered a modal verb. All right, so what are modal verbs again? Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs or helping verbs, just like are, is, am, was, were, has, have. These are helping verbs. Modal verbs are just another category of helping verbs, okay? But here, in this case, modal verbs have some motivation. Okay, they have some motivation. And whenever you use a modal verb, remember that the main verb that is put right after a modal verb must be in its base form. As in, you cannot, we don't change the form of that main verb to the past form of it, or to the present form of it, or to the future form of it. Do you follow? Or I'll keep it simple. I'll say it in simple words. So just for example, when I say I can do it, I can do it, or I can talk. When I say I can talk, so here, what's the main verb in this sentence? The main verb is the word talk, right? So when I say I can talk, I tell you, or I'm telling you about my ability. I'm actually telling you that I have the ability to talk when I say I can talk, or I can sing. If I say to you that I can sing, I'd be telling you I'll be actually telling you one of my abilities, which would be to sing. Okay? All right. So just like that, modal verbs are used to denote permission, or used to actually mean permission or possibility, ability, obligation, right? Okay. So after a modal verb, we don't put to. We don't put the word to or the preposition to. We just don't. We cannot say I can to sing. No, we say I can sing. Okay. The only exception is the modal verb ought to. Ought to is a modal verb phrase, and it comes this way. You cannot just write ought. Right after ought, you have to write to. Now, ought to is a synonym, or it's just another word that means the same. That means the same as should, as the modal verb should. So should and ought to are pretty much the same. Okay. All right. Now take a look at this slide here. Modal verbs add meaning to the main verb in a sentence by expressing possibility, ability, permission, or obligation. Modal verbs add meaning to the main verb in a sentence by expressing possibility, ability, permission, or obligation. So take a look or consider the following examples here. You must turn in your assignment on time. You must turn in your assignment on time. She might be the love of my life. The doctor can see you now. In each of these examples, we have used a modal verb, such as the first example. You must turn in your assignment on time. Now, with the use of the modal verb must, we're actually expressing an obligation here, something that must be done, something that has to be done. And there is no other alternative, but it has to be done. It must be done. So there is a sense of obligation here. There is a compulsory idea here, right? That that the person or the person who is being spoken to has to do something. So you must turn in your assignment. What about the second example? She might be the love of my life, right? So maybe you're talking about a person and maybe you have fallen in love with her, and you're not too sure if you really want her to be yours or if you really want to get married to her, but you're just discussing with your friend on this issue, right? So you say, she might be the love of my life. She might be the love of my life. So when you say might or may, this actually denotes possibility of something, likeliness of something. This is nothing certain, but rather tells you the likeliness or the possibility of something. So she might be the love of my life. All right. The doctor can see you now. Can, as I discussed already, the modal verb can is actually talking about someone's ability. When, say for example, the doctor's receptionist walks up to you and says, the doctor can see you now. So maybe the doctor was busy, but now he's free, and now he has the ability to see you now. And now you go and actually pay the visit to the doctor, or pay your visit to the doctor. So you say, or the receptionist walks up to you and says, the doctor can see you now. Okay? So modal verbs are actually used to express possibility, ability, permission, or obligation. All right? Okay. What do we have here? When a modal verb precedes the main verb in a sentence or clause, use the root of the verb rather than the infinitive, which contains the word to. I'll read this out again for you. When a modal verb precedes the main verb, when a modal verb precedes the main verb in a sentence or clause, use the root of the verb rather than the infinitive, which contains the word to, such as the doctor can see you now. Never, the doctor can to see you now. So this is something that we have already discussed, where you know that right after a modal verb, the main verb that the modal verb is helping to stand must be put in its base form, in its actual form. So the doctor can see you now. Never can to see you now. We will never write, or we will never say can to. Okay? But we will drop the to, and we will just put the main verb in its actual form or in its base form, such as see. So the doctor can see you now. The one case in which we deviate from this rule and use the full infinitive form of a verb is with the modal phrase ought to, which is similar to should. So take a look at the example here. The doctor ought to see you now. But only in this case, as discussed already, when we talk about ought to, when we use the modal verb phrase ought to, we don't drop to, but rather keep it. And we say the doctor ought to see you now. But here, the definition or the idea somehow changes. When you say, or the sentence, the doctor can see you now, and the sentence, the doctor ought to see you now, don't mean the same. In the first sentence, with the help of with the use of the modal verb can, you're actually told the ability of the doctor. The doctor has now the ability, or has the ability to to see you now. But when you say that the doctor ought to see you now, you don't mean, or you're not talking about the doctor's ability, but rather you are talking about something that the doctor should do or should be doing, right? Maybe you have waited long enough, waiting for a long time, and the doctor hasn't called you in yet, okay? And then maybe, your friend who has been accompanying you now says to you, the doctor ought to see you now. The doctor should see you now. He should make time and see you now because we've been waiting it for quite some time. You see? So the verb phrase or the modal verb phrase ought to actually conveys a sense of obligation, right? Just like must. So the doctor must see you now, or the doctor should see you now. Similarly, the doctor ought to see you now. So must, should, ought to, they talk about obligation, or they denote, or they convey the sense of obligation. But the modal verb can conveys the sense of ability. Okay? Such as I can do it for you. I can talk to him. I can sing. I can talk. I can dance. All these things, or all these sentences convey my ability to do certain things. But if I say I ought to do it, it means I should do it, or I must do it, conveying a sense of obligation. All right? Okay. Now, to do as a modal verb. What about this? To do as a modal verb. The verb to do can be used as a modal verb or a main verb. In this sentence, to do is being used as a main verb and can is being used as a modal verb, such as you can do it. Whereas in this example, do is used as a modal verb. You do. Or another category of auxiliary verbs that basically help main verbs to stand. Okay? Now, what about the word do? What about the verb? What about the verb do? Do at times can also be used just like a modal verb. The verb do can be used just like a modal verb at times. Such as, for example, I can tell you, I do sing. I do sing. Now, when I say I do sing, is it the same as I can sing? Yes, it conveys the same meaning that you can sing, that you have the ability to sing. But when you say I do sing, you just not only talk about your ability to sing, but rather something that you do maybe often, right? So I do sing, or I do study hard. Say, for example, maybe someone's asking, or maybe someone is actually doubting whether you study hard enough, whether you work hard enough, right? So maybe a colleague of yours, or maybe your boss, or maybe some friend of yours is just telling you don't work hard enough, right? Just saying something like that to you, that you don't work hard enough. And then you reply, but this time you reply with some conviction, and you say, well, I do work hard. You say, I do work hard. Here you see there is some sort of force in your reply, letting the other person know that the other person is wrong, and that you don't do what the other person says or is saying, but rather you know what you do, and you say that I do work hard. Okay, so here the word do is performing or is working or is functioning like a modal verb, where right after do, right after the verb do, you're actually putting the main verb of your sentence, which is work. You see, and you're keeping it in its actual form or in its base form. So you say, I do work hard. You don't say, I do too. No, I do work hard. Do here, working like a modal verb, such as, you do know how to sing. I do know how to sing. Or I do see my parents, or I do see my grandparents on weekends, or I do meet my friends. Okay? When do you have to use this? Only when you have to increase the form, focus on your main verb more. You could say, I see my grandparents on the weekend, but that is just that. If you said something like that, it would mean that you're just stating out what you do. But when you say, I do see my parents, sorry, I do see my grandparents on weekend, when you say like that, you're actually putting some pressure or force, or you're increasing the focus on the fact or on the verb that you go and see your grandparents on weekends. So I do see my grandparents on weekends increases or emphasizes more on your main verb that you do something. Okay? So not saying it that way and just saying that I see my grandparents on weekends, there is no force here. There is no pressure here. There is no special emphasis on the verb see. Follow? Okay, I hope I was clear enough. If I wasn't, do let me know. I would definitely, I'll explain to you again if I weren't or if I wasn't clear enough. Okay. Remember, however, that do can be used as a modal verb only if there is no other modal verb present in the sentence, such as, thank you, I can do sing. You cannot say can do sing. Follow this. You cannot say I can when you've already mentioned, when you already have a modal verb in your sentence, you cannot follow it. You cannot follow the modal verb with the verb do. You only keep do when you don't have a modal verb. Okay? So we don't say, or you cannot say, thank you, I can do sing. That is just incorrect. So we will say, thank you, I can sing. Thank you, I do sing. All right? Yeah, that is exactly how we're going to go about. Then Zamoni is saying, in our syllabus of another chapter, direct and indirect speech, is this chapter we'll discuss next class, sir? Yes. We will discuss direct and indirect speech on Monday, inshallah. I wanted to discuss it today, but it's quite a lengthy chapter and it will take some time to cover it. So I wanted to finish 2 chapters by today, which is why I chose modal verbs and active and the active and passive voice, the active passive voice. But direct and indirect speech must be covered or has to be covered at length, which is why I'm going to devote one complete session or one full session to this chapter. Okay? All right, so do you have any other questions regarding modal verbs or the active or passive voice? If you do, now is the time. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to post your queries in the comment section so I can answer your questions. Okay? Let me know. Okay. Thank you for posting your queries here. I can see we're getting some very good questions. Let's start with this question from Ms. Baldinamid. Can we change voice of any proverb? Actually, no. Only verbs have voices. Only verbs have voices. Verbs have tenses. Verbs have moods, number, and person. No, not proverbs, because a proverb, wait, you're talking about a proverb, right? Could you come up with any proverb that we could actually see if we could apply the change of the voice, change of the voice of the proverb? Let's just come up with any proverb. You let me know. Okay. Then we have this another question or query from Ashika Rahman asking, what are the uses of when, at, in, with, to instead of by in the passive voice? The uses of when, at, in, with, to instead of by. Okay, first of all, you need to know why we use the preposition by in the passive voice. We do so to let to actually talk about the subject or the action taker, not the subject, but the action taker, such as when you say, the dog chased the squirrel. Now, this sentence is in the active voice, and here the subject is clearly identified when you put the subject at first. The dog did something, right? The dog chased the squirrel. But in the passive voice, you're actually changing the voice of the sentence, and you're actually putting the object at first, making it or transforming it into the subject of the sentence, saying the squirrel. Now, this time, the subject is here, and with the help of the verb, or with the new passive verb, you're actually saying that something happened to the subject. But what caused it? Who caused this to happen? To express that, or talk about that, or to convey that idea, to talk about who caused this action, you need to, or we go with the preposition by. So the dog chased the squirrel, but in the passive voice, the squirrel was chased by the dog. So the action of chasing was actually done by someone. By whom? By the dog. Now, you cannot put at, when, with, or to in place of by in this case. Can you? You cannot. So you have to say, the squirrel was chased by the dog. The pizza was completely devoured by my friends. The pizza was eaten by my friends. Who ate the pizza? My friends did, right? My friends ate the pizza. This is in the active voice. In the passive voice, the pizza was eaten by my friends. Okay, so who did so? When you want to talk about the person or the element that caused the action, you need to bring in the verb. You need to bring in the preposition by. Okay, all right. All right, we have this. Have we discussed this? Now, Sultan Al-Arfat is asking, please exemplify the use of can versus could, will versus would, shall versus should. Do they always indicate difference of tense or anything beyond tense? Well, you see, we talk about can and could can be used interchangeably at times, but could is considered as the past tense of the modal verb can. Such as, for example, maybe you don't do something now, but you used to do something, such as, for example, or you were able to do something in the past, something that you don't do anymore, or something that you don't have the ability to do anymore. So you say, I can sing. It tells you, or it tells me, when I say that I can sing, the idea is that I can sing and I do sing, and I can sing, and it's in the present. I still have the ability to sing. But if I tell you I could sing, it actually conveys the idea that I don't or I cannot sing anymore, but rather I could sing, letting you know that I had the ability to sing, but in the past, not now, not anymore. Okay, will versus would needs a lot of time to explain. Will is, of course, we know we use will to talk about future actions, right? This is a modal verb that is used to talk about future actions, such as I will talk to you, I will see you, I will go, I will do, letting you know that what you want to do in the future, what I want to do in the future. But would has multiple uses. The first uses, of course, that would is the past tense of will, and you talk about, or you bring in the verb, the modal verb would, when you want to say that someone said that that he or she would do something in the future, right? But this thing was said in the past, such as, for example, today I tell you that I will. I think there's a glitch. Right. Yeah, we're back. So right now I'm telling you that I will discuss direct and indirect speech on Monday. This is something I'm telling you right now. But consider or think, imagine now we are on Tuesday. Monday is gone by. Monday's gone, and now we are on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, you're talking about Friday, right? You're talking about the preceding Friday on Tuesday. And you are talking about what I said on Friday. So you say, well, you said on Friday that you would discuss direct and indirect speech on Monday. You see? So on Friday, from this moment onward, I tell you I will do something. But in the future, you look back to the past and you talk and you're talking about what someone has said or what someone said in the past. But in the past, someone said that someone would do something in the future. And when he said so, he actually used the word will, because he was to do it. He was going to do it. But now in the future time, which is the present time for you now, he said he would do it, not will anymore, because that will would then completely change the understanding of the situation, right? Are we clear on this? Maybe a little tricky, but if you actually look up the definitions or the uses of would, you will become more you'll be more clear on the uses of would. Also, this is not the only use of would, where would is the past tense of will. Would is also used to talk about actions that you would do if you had the chance to. Just like we were discussing yesterday, remember that if I were you, I wouldn't do it. You see? So the modal verb would is again used to talk about an action that you would do only if you had the chance to. Now, you don't have that opportunity, such as if I were a billionaire, I would donate a lot to the poor. But I'm not a billionaire, and maybe I'm not going to be a billionaire, not anytime soon. So I'm not having that opportunity to donate a lot to the poor. So I cannot do it. But only if I were in that situation, what would I do? Not will, but what would I do? I would donate to the poor. Okay? All right. Shall versus should. Shall is, of course, a replacement of will, right? Shall is just like will and is a replacement of will only when you want to replace with shall. And should tells you about obligation. Okay? Should is used to convey the idea of obligation. So I should do it. You should do it. You should talk to your parents. You should follow your boss's orders. You should take care of your family, right? So conveying obligation or talking about obligations. To talk about obligations, we use the modal verb should. And you use shall just like you use will. I shall go and do this tomorrow. Okay, I shall do this tomorrow. So something that you want to do in the future, you use shall to convey the idea. Or you use shall as the modal verb, as the helping verb to support your main verb of the sentence. All right. So yes, this is pretty much it. But I would recommend you that you please look up the uses of would. It's easily, it can be easily found on Google. Just look them up. You'll be more clear. You'll be clearer on the uses of would. Okay. Oh, we've got so many questions now. Ms. Bogdan saying, actions speak louder than words. How can I change the voice of this proverb? All right, there are certain sentences in Proverbs that need not changing, okay, that don't have to be changed, and they're better the way they are. And not every sentence can be changed to the passive voice, or not every active sentence can be changed to the passive voice. There are certain sentences only that you can change and certain that you cannot. Such as, for example, I spoke to my boss. I spoke to my boss. Here you clearly have a subject, you clearly have a verb, and you clearly have an object, right? I is the subject, spoke is my verb, and my boss is in this subject, in this sentence, is the object. when you have a sentence like that, when you clearly have a subject, a verb, and an object, that is a subject. Sorry, that is a sentence that you can change to the passive voice, or that is a sentence that you can actually construct using the passive voice, reconstruct in the passive voice, right? So you could say, my boss was spoken to by me. I spoke to my boss, or I spoke with my boss, or I met with my boss. You could say, my boss was met with by me, or my boss was spoken with by me, or my boss was spoken to by me. Okay? But proverbs or sentences like these, actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. Can you really change this to the passive voice? Let's just try. Actions speak louder than words. Not really, no. I cannot. Can you? Let me know if you can. I think this is unchangeable. So actions speak louder than words. And this is fine as it is. You cannot really change this particular proverb to the active voice. I am unable to. If you can, let me know. But as far as I know, proverbs come and are kept the way they have come. Okay? We don't change the voice of proverbs. All right. Russell Arman is asking, sorry, can we use do instead of any modal verb? It depends on the use of your sentence, right? Such as, for example, if you want to say that I can speak in English. Now, if you want to change the modal verb, or you want to replace the modal verb can with do, maybe you can, but then again, the meaning will change, right? So saying that I can speak in English tells or talks about your ability to speak English. But when you say I do speak in English, it just doesn't tell you that you can speak English, but rather says that you speak in English often, or you do something regularly, that I do speak in English. I do speak in English, okay? Here, the focus is on the verb that you do speak, that you speak a lot, or maybe you speak in English. But I can tells you or talks about your ability, okay? All right. And then what? I think we have a query here from Dustin Bushra. As a modal verb and auxiliary verb are the same, why is classified and named differently? Oh, yeah, so that's because they function a little differently, right? Because are, have, has don't really convey the same meaning as can, will, shall do, right? Such as, for example, there isn't a verb, there isn't a helping verb that clearly specifies your ability. But the modal helping verb can does, right? When you say, I can do this, here in this sentence, the listener or the person that you're talking to comes to know of your ability to do something, right? Which is why you have two different categories here. What else? Sultan Al Arafat saying, thanks for elucidating so nicely. You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Thanks to you too for making this wonderful remark. Thank you. So yes, this is pretty much it. I think there's another question here from Salahuddin asking, is it mandatory to use a preposition before the passive subject? Is it mandatory to use a preposition before the passive subject? No, of course not. As in, like, in what way? You mean to say, for example, if you're asking if we should keep by or not, yes, we should keep by, definitely. Such as, for example, the squirrel was chased by the dog. So we are keeping the preposition by before the dog here. To talk about the person, the subject, or to discuss about or talk about the action taker here, yes, we have to bring in the preposition by, otherwise your sentence would be grammatically incorrect, right? So yeah, but only by, not any other preposition. So you can say that the money was counted by the cashier. The money was counted by the cashier. The dog was chased, or the squirrel was chased by the dog. Bananas are adored by monkeys, not to monkeys or at monkeys or in monkeys or on monkeys. Other prepositions wouldn't fit. Only by would, and by does. Okay? All right. Any other query? Okay, we were impressed with the performance. Can we use by instead of with? We can. We can. There are certain words or phrases or sentences where you can actually replace the preposition in the sentence with other prepositions. So in this particular case, we were impressed with the performance. I think by is more appropriate in this case. So we were impressed by her performance. You see, the preposition by actually talks about or conveys or talks about the method of something. So you were impressed. Exactly in what method were you impressed? Why were you impressed? So to convey that idea or the method, talk about the method of this impression, it's better to use the preposition by. So I was impressed by her. I was impressed by him. I was impressed by the way he did the work. You see? So by is a more appropriate or a more fitting preposition for this particular case. Okay? All right. So everyone, thank you so much for coming up with such wonderful questions. I hope we have had a very fruitful session. You can always reach out to me through the by posting your queries in the comment section. And if you miss out any question, don't worry, post the question again. Or if you think that you couldn't post a query of yours, don't worry, you can do it again in our next session. Okay? So I hope to see all of you, inshallah, on Monday. So until then, everyone, please take good care of yourselves, stay fit, and yeah, see you again. Allah Hafiz.